What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. It's time for the top 10 disappointments of the 2022 college football season. We had a few teams that really disappointed, that really just had high expectations and wound up having terrible seasons, honestly. So we're going to go through these disappointments, and don't worry, if you want to see the other side of this tomorrow, I'll be posting the top 10 surprise teams, the teams that were better than expected, but these teams all worse than expected. And we'll start with number 10. That's the Baylor Bears. Baylor finishes 6-6. This is a team that I personally had in the Big 12 championship. A lot of people had them winning the Big 12 this year. I didn't expect them to be a playoff team, so they weren't that far off as far as the caliber team I thought they could be this year. But just lost some close games and wound up, again, finishing 6-6. Luckily, they did at least get to a bowl game. Remember, they were the team that probably came closest to beating TCU in the regular season and came down to that wild field goal at the end. You could also maybe throw Oklahoma State in here. I, at one point, was maybe going to put them at a tie for number 10, but I felt like Baylor was clearly a bigger disappointment. Oklahoma State won 7-5. That was a team that a lot of people were hyping up. I did not hype up Oklahoma State in the preseason. I could see a lot of their issues coming, but a lot of people had them potentially getting to the Big 12 championship. But yeah, Baylor, a team that, again, a lot of people, not just me, a lot of people had them in the Big 12 championship. Many of them had them winning the Big 12 championship, and they wind up barely making it to a bowl game. At number 9, we got Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, was not a team that was expected to go 9-3 or 10-2, anything like that. But I think a lot of people, including myself, expected them to do better than 3-8. And of course, that final game of the year got canceled, so they could have been 3-9 or possibly 4-8. But still, I thought this was a bowl team. Brought in the transfer quarterback from Marshall. I thought that the offense would be better. I thought there was enough talent. This was actually kind of my dark horse in the ACC Coastal Division, a team that I thought could possibly maybe sneak up there and get in the top 2 or 3 of that division, and it just didn't happen. This team struggled big time and didn't even come close to a bowl game. To me, they were a big disappointment this season. Number 8 is Arkansas. Arkansas did get to 6-6, and they did play a really tough schedule. But they took care of business against BYU and Cincinnati. It was really the games in the SEC that surprised me, that they lose 6 of those games. This is a team that I think was better than the 6-6 record. You look at, again, that Texas A&M game, they really should have won that game, had opportunities against Missouri at the end of the season, a couple other close games in there. So I think they were better than that 6-6 record, but Arkansas was a team that some people even had preseason top 10, top 15. I wasn't quite that high on them, but still I thought they would do better than 6-6. I believe I predicted them to go 8-4. So yeah, they were a disappointment this year, but at least they did get to a bowl game. And with a tough schedule, not a horrible season, but still, again, a disappointment. Number 7 is Wisconsin. Wisconsin 6-6. They barely make it to a bowl game. This is another team that I tried to warn you guys about. Everyone was hyping them up. I saw them in somebody's playoff predictions. Saw them in the top 10 in the preseason for a lot of people. I was never really in on Wisconsin this year. I picked Purdue to win the Big Ten West. For once, I actually got that division right. That's been the toughest division for me to predict. Just got lucky, honestly, because that thing was so wide open. But I was not as high on Wisconsin. You looked at everything that they lost from last season. Graham Mertz just has not come around. He's now in the transfer portal. Of course, now they have Luke Fickell, and I think they'll turn it around pretty quick. But this is a team that I think for a lot of people was a big disappointment. Again, not as much for me. I think I maybe had them at 7-5, so they were just a little bit under that. But a lot of people really hyped this team up, and because of that, I think they were a big disappointment in 2022. NC State, number 6. Now, this one, is it fair to put them on here because they were really good before Devin Leary got hurt? But 8-4, the final record. This is a team that I thought would at least get to 9-3. Felt like there was a good chance they could get to 10-2. Didn't have a very tough schedule at all. But it does come back to Devin Leary. If he stays in there, stays healthy, this team probably gets to 9-3 at least. But again, a disappointment. That was just part of it. The injury was part of the disappointment. and NC State only going 8-4 to me was a pretty big disappointment. A lot of people thought that this was a team that could possibly challenge Clemson in the Atlantic, and it just didn't happen. And I believe they did have Devin Leary against Clemson, still didn't win that game. All right, number 5, Alabama. It's not often that you see a team going 10-2 and being on the top 10 most disappointing teams list, but I think that is the case with Alabama. This is a team that I thought was going to win the national championship. Many people agreed with that. Again, a lot of us thought that this was the team to beat. This was the best team in the country, and they just weren't. The 10-2 record, we know they had some other close games in there as well. They could have gone 12-0, just a couple of plays away from that. But like I've said, they could have been 7-5. It could have been 8-4. Could have been 9-3. So to me, this was a really big disappointment this year. Alabama, a team that I thought was pretty much a lock to make the college football playoff, and I felt like they were going to win it all, and it just didn't happen. Offensive line still did not do what they've done in the past. Didn't really get a run game going this year like they needed to. The receivers didn't play great. The defense at times was not great, but overall they were pretty solid. But yeah, you just look at a tough schedule, tough road games. They wind up going 10-2, and that was, for Alabama standards, a very big disappointment. Number 4, Michigan State. Michigan State goes 5-7, not even making it to a bowl game. This is a team that I picked to be a surprise team this year, and it was the opposite of that. They go 9-3, or I had them going 9-3, I should say. They go 5-7. Really just didn't play great. Both sides of the ball struggled, and we figured this out pretty quick. When they went and played Washington and we saw that defense get torched, we found out pretty quick that Michigan State was not going to be very good this year, and they were absolutely a disappointment. Now, these top 4 were really bad. Let's go to number 3 now, Miami. Miami also going 5-7. This is a team that I thought was going, I think most people expected them to win the Coastal Division. I was even higher on them. Again, I understand it was a terrible prediction, but I picked this team to go to the college football playoff. I thought that we were going to get a surprise team this year, and we did. It turned out to be TCU. But I thought Miami had the potential to do that, to be that team, and they had a lot of the same issues from last year. Just injuries also hurt them. Tyler Van Dyke getting injured. Defense was awful at times. This was just not a very good football team. There might be talent on the roster, but they did not play as a team. They did this as a team. This was just not a good team at all. And Miami not even going to a bowl game after, yes, I know, I picked them to go to the college football playoff. And looking back, obviously, that was a terrible, terrible prediction. All right, number 2, Oklahoma. Oklahoma, 6-6, barely making it to a bowl game. This is a team that I had in the Big 12 championship. Very similar to Baylor. I think the way that they lost some of their games, the way they got blown out, I feel like Baylor was a more competitive team than Oklahoma. This team at times just looked awful, and I mean awful. Again, same record as Baylor, but if you look at the way their seasons went, this is a team that just really, really struggled, especially on defense, where we expected this to be a good defense with Brent Venables, and it just wasn't. It's going to take some time, obviously, if they're going to get that turned around. But this is a team that I had winning the Big 12. Really high hopes. A lot of people had them in the top 10 in the preseason, and it was just, again, they were probably worse than their record would suggest. 6-6 record, but they were probably even worse than that. Lucky to win some of those games and just really didn't play well in a lot of games. So Oklahoma, big disappointment at number 2, but not the biggest disappointment. The biggest disappointment of 2022, Texas A&M. Texas A&M, 5-7, the number 1 recruiting class in the country, and they don't even make it to a bowl game. Yes, I would say that is a major disappointment. A lot of people had them. Most people had them at like 5 or 6 in the preseason. I did not. I wasn't as high on this team. I had them at 8-4, so I thought they'd be better than 5-7. But yeah, a lot of people, some people had them in the playoff. I believe Desmond Howard had Texas A&M in the playoff. His predictions were absolutely terrible. If you thought mine were bad, just go look at his predictions. But yeah, Texas A&M at 5-7, just a major disappointment with all that talent. You look at the injury to Max Johnson, I think that hurt them. but it was really just across the board. They just did not play well at all. Didn't make it to a bowl game, and there's just no excuse. Number one recruiting class, and they had really good recruiting classes before that, so it's not all on these freshmen. But this is a team that had the talent to be a top 15 team at least, and they did not do that. They were 5-7 again. Big time disappointment there. It's clearly, to me, the most disappointing team of 2022. Who was a big disappointment for you? Who would you add to the list? Who do you think maybe I'm being a little too hard on? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports YouTube channel.